Good morning, and thank you for joining us as we commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'm your host, historian Edna Friedberg. 78 years ago, Soviet forces arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi killing center, to find only a few thousand prisoners still remaining alive. Weeks before, the Nazis began emptying Auschwitz in an attempt to cover up their crimes. Some 1.1 million people were murdered at this camp in German-occupied Poland. The vast majority of them were Jewish. Today, on the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, we will hear from Irene Weiss, an Auschwitz survivor. For more than 25 years, Irene understandably found it too painful to speak publicly about the loss of her family and what she endured. But once Irene began speaking, she became a powerful voice for Holocaust remembrance. She has testified at the trials of Nazi perpetrators and shared her story with countless students and visitors to our museum. Irene, it's an honor to have you with us today. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Viewers, please share your questions for Irene in the comments, and we'll get to as many as possible in the course of our show. And we already have a comment from a woman named Jacinda who writes that she is grateful for the survivors who tell the truth. So, Irene, let's begin at the beginning. We have a lovely photo of you as a baby. Would you please introduce us to your family and tell us a little bit about your community?
Yes, so the baby is me and my mother holding me. She's about 30 years old at this point. And on the left side, my sister Serena, and on the other side is my brother Moshe. So at this point, my mother has 3 children. We lived in a small town, what was Czechoslovakia at the time, farming town, and there were only 10 Jewish families in this town. So the life was busy. My parents were occupied with raising a family and doing all the things one needs to do with a large family.
And the family did indeed grow. Less than 2 years later, your younger sister Edith was born. And thank you for sharing with us a photograph of the two of you wearing matching dresses, right?
Yes. So that is my sister. I am there, and my sister Edith, and the other little girl is our cousin.
So in total, how many kids in your family? How many siblings?
So there were 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, and it was, just a busy household with children going to school and all the things that that goes with raising a large family. I know my mother worked every day from morning till night.
I'm sure that's a lot of laundry, a lot of meals to cook.
Yes.
And what did your father do for a living?
My father had a lumber yard in a nearby town, and he went there daily and came back. It was very near, and that was that was his job. In fact, he had a partner. His cousin was a partner. That was later confiscated.
So let's turn to some of that now. And you've shared with me that your family and your last name, your maiden name was Fogel, had lived in this community for 3 generations. And that you've told me you don't recall any anti-Jewish sentiment in your village before the wartime. But in early 1939, your hometown in Czechoslovakia was occupied by Hungary. That's a neighboring country that was an ally of Nazi Germany. And over the next several years, it became increasingly stressful and dangerous for Jews living there. How did life change for you and your family under the Hungarian occupation?
Well, yes, it changed very much. In stages, things became more difficult. The children couldn't go to school anymore. My father's business was confiscated. The radio was blaring anti-Jewish stories and accusations. Hitler's words were heard on the radio. The Jews were blamed for everything that was wrong in the world. including that they started the war. The local young teenage type boys were empowered by the new freedom to show disrespect to Jews, and my father and other men hesitated to go outdoors or be seen too much outdoors because there would be attacks, there would be humiliation, and in any uh, encounter like that, the Jew was wrong because the law no longer supported us.
So clearly this feeling of vulnerability, of danger. And to be clear again, the persecution at this stage was not because of Germans. There were no Germans there. This was under Hungarian rule. To make sure that people in the audience understand the context, I want to remind us that in March 1944, the Germans invaded Hungary, and within weeks, Irene's family and tens of thousands of Jews were rounded up and forced into a ghetto near the town of Munkac. Conditions were terrible in the ghetto. There was not enough food. People had to sleep on the floor. Irene, could you please tell us about a day that all of the girls held in the ghetto were called together, girls under the age of 16 were called together and forced to have their hair cut off?
Yes, I heard the announcement that girls under 16 should report to a certain area to have their hair cut, or their fathers would be punished. So anything like that was, there's always a rule any rule that they announced to be followed was had an attachment to somebody in your family will suffer. So I just immediately went to this place, and there were other little girls waiting in line, and in a few minutes my braids were cut and my hair was cut, and I went back to where my mother was, and she looked at me sadly. There wasn't a great deal of discussion about it. She handed me a kerchief to put on, and so I wore that from then on to cover my head, and I began to look like she did, like a little married Jewish woman who typically were wearing a scarf to cover their heads.
Yeah, that the tradition is to cover their hair for modesty.
Yes.
Irene, I'd like to pause for a moment to welcome people who are watching and also to let you know, Irene, where people are watching from. Good morning to viewers who are joining us from Columbus, Ohio, Adams, Nebraska, Boise, Idaho, Chicago, Illinois, and Sunshine, Louisiana. And we are also very pleased to have viewers from all over the world, from countries including England, Germany, Ukraine, Malta, the Netherlands, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, and Trinidad and Tobago. We're so glad that we're here. We also, on a more personal note, would like to say good morning and welcome to Irene's sister, Serena, and her daughter, Susan, and Irene, your cousins, Jeff and Shira. We are so happy to have people from your family with us today. So back to 1944, in just over 2 months, in late spring and early summer, more than 426,000 Jewish people were rounded up by Hungarian police and deported to Auschwitz. And after several weeks being held in a ghetto, Irene's family was among those packed into a rail car with no idea where they were headed. Irene, you were just 13 years old, and at some point, your father realized that the train was headed in the direction of Poland. What fears did that provoke in him and others packed into this cattle car?
Yes. So before we were taken to the ghetto, we heard of stories that in Nazi occupied Poland, the Jews were being murdered, and that whole people from the villages were taken into the forest, and the Nazis were mowing them down mercilessly, and that this was going on every day, and that we felt that they probably exaggerated, and that we did not believe that that was possible, and sort of dismissed those horror stories about the murders of Jews in Poland. But when the train was turning in the direction of Poland, we suddenly remembered those rumors, and it became a little bit more realistic that perhaps when the doors open, we will find ourselves in a forest in Poland with a German Nazi squad waiting to mow us down in the way that we heard. And so there was now silence in the cattle car, great sadness and concern. Everybody was quiet, even the children. They didn't make any noise or ask any questions. They realized that something serious was happening. And so it became reality that we will be killed upon arrival by the Nazi guns.
And of course, we now know that the rumors that you had heard of shooting massacres were in fact true for well over 1 million Jewish people, but that was not the fate of your family. Instead, you arrived at a place whose name you did not know, Auschwitz. And please tell us when the doors opened from the train, what you saw and how you felt.
Yes, so when the doors opened, my father again told everyone that I see barracks and I see prisoners in striped uniform, and this is not the forest in Poland. This looks like a labor camp, and if it is a labor camp, this we can work if that's our fate at the moment. But everybody was relieved, and everybody thought that this is good news, and we were all cheered by what we saw. And then, of course, we found out that this was a different kind of work camp.
Yeah, but understandably, that form of a feeling of some relief that it wasn't the immediate violence. And I want to remind our viewers that people did not know everything, could not know everything that we now know about the Holocaust, didn't know what information was reliable, what was not, and there weren't news broadcasts about Auschwitz available to them at this time. Irene and her family and the hundreds of thousands of other Hungarian Jews arriving at this time could not know that they had arrived at one of the most deadly of the Nazi camps. Auschwitz was in fact more than one camp. It was a large complex encompassing concentration camps, forced labor camps, and also within an area known as Auschwitz-Birkenau, there were multiple gas chambers and crematoria. Irene, you soon learned that at Auschwitz there was a different version of cruelty. It was not only a work camp after all, and in a matter of minutes, your parents, you, and your siblings were all forced apart. I know these are very difficult and painful memories, but could you please tell us what happened when you got off of the train?
Well, when the doors opened, they were shouting orders, get out fast, leave everything behind, line up, men line up in one column and women and children in another. Things were moving very fast. In a matter of minutes, this was accomplished, and the women and children in the column were moving forward quite fast. And all of a sudden, my family was facing about a dozen Nazi soldiers. One of them was holding a stick, and as soon as he took a look at who was in front of him, he motioned people this way and that way, and basically women and children were immediately sent to one side, and elderly also, and young adults were sent to a different side, and my sister Serena, who was 17, was sent to one side and she disappeared from view. Next, my mother and two little boys were sent to in another direction, and they disappeared from view. Now, I was left with my sister Edith holding her hand, and suddenly the stick came down between us, and she went in the direction where our mother went. However, between the time that my mother left, many other people went in that direction, and that she would be unable to. I was terrified to realize that she will not catch up to our mother, and how is she going to meet with them, and what will happen to them. And I was panicked that we have lost her, that we will never get together with her. I panicked for her to be in a large crowd in such a scary place. And so I didn't move after the separation. I stayed for a few minutes, leaning in the direction where she went, hoping to see her catching up with our mother. Because there were barriers, I could not see anything. And after lingering a little bit, I was told to get moving in the direction where the young adults went, and I ran to catch up with my sister Serena.
I can hear in your voice how even all of these decades later, how wrenching this moment is for you, that you felt you were your sister's protector and you couldn't protect her. No one could protect her in that moment. Irene, when we saw that photo, which actually is of you up close, we are reminded of the story that you told us earlier about your hair being cut off in the ghetto. Wearing that scarf may have saved Irene's life that day by making her appear older, because as we now know, this sorting of people, known as selection, was to see who was the right age and strong enough to be exploited as slave labor. Young children were not considered useful as workers, so they were sent immediately to the gas chambers. But maybe this kerchief made you seem older than your age. The day that Irene arrived at Auschwitz in May 1944 was the last moment that her family, the Fogels, were together. And after Irene was given a uniform and assigned to barracks, a group of prisoners tried to tell her and her older sister Serena what had happened to their mother and siblings. Irene, what do you remember about that conversation?
Well, when we got into the barracks, we met people who had come before us, and we wanted to know what was going on here. And most of all, our most important question was, when is the reunion with our families? Because we certainly assumed from what we knew about the way things work, that the women and children were separated. That meant that they will not work, and there will be a reunion periodically. And they were amazed that we even asked such a question. They pointed to a chimney, and they told us that that's where your families are. There is no reunion here. And they didn't spare us our feelings. We, however, did not believe them. All these extraordinary things that we heard about this place, we dismissed it. We did not believe it. But of course, they were right.
You've told me before that everything that happened since you arrived, you were trying to make sense of it using normal human logic, but it didn't compute. Could you say a little more about that, please?
Right. So we looked for signs of familiar human kind of behavior, things that we remembered and enjoyed up to now. We tried to fit this into that knowledge, and of course we were totally wrong, because just because the women and children were separated, that did not mean that there is compassion towards them. But why would we ever think anything else, that there is a gas chamber waiting for them, and that in a matter of minutes after being separated, they would all be dead. How could we possibly have had such an idea? And if we were told that, we certainly did not believe that.
Of course not. It absolutely defies imagination, any frame of reference from before that time. Irene, viewers named Pam and Andrea have asked similar kinds of questions. They want to know what helped you have the will to survive. And did you see anyone else that you knew after you arrived at Auschwitz?
Yes. Well, in this terrifying place, it became a little bit more bearable when all of a sudden, in outdoors, in the crowd of people, we ran into my mother's two young sisters. They had arrived in Auschwitz a few days before, and uh, Roji and Piri, two young ladies who all of a sudden, uh, my terror was a little bit, I felt a little bit better because now suddenly they represented parents to me, and they were very eager to protect us as much as possible. Now I was a very frightened person for good reasons. Uh, First of all, we felt this attitude of the Nazi soldiers who treated us like subhumans, to be done to whatever they felt like. They had total power. And in addition to that, I was 13 years old, and 13-year-olds were selected for the gas chamber, not for work. So I was daily vulnerable to the selection, plus the the treatment of being a subhuman is very scary when another human being treats you like you are not a person. And I was always terrified. And here were my two aunts who did not think I was a subhuman, but that I was uh, their sister's child, and this emotional support uh, gave me a chance to stabilize my terrifying experience there.
Of course, as you're saying, they still saw you as who you were and loved you. Um, Irene, you've described to me how you were later assigned to work in an area known as Canada, where prisoners working there were responsible for sorting all of the personal possessions looted from Jews upon arrival at Auschwitz. Again, this is hundreds of thousands of people, so masses of ordinary objects like eyeglasses, shoes, toothbrushes. Irene and the others worked in close proximity to the gas chambers and crematoria. And day in and day out, you and others saw women and children, people with disabilities, heading unknowingly to their deaths. Could you please describe to us what you saw, what you heard, and how it affected you at the time?
So once we were in our barracks, we saw columns of women and children and elderly pass on the road in front of our barrack, heading towards the gate of the gas chamber. They were uh, totally unaware of where they were going. They were asking us questions, where we're coming, where we're from. They felt relieved to see us being in barracks. They imagined that they were also heading into the barracks. It, at that point, there was no reason to tell them their fate, because nothing could save them at this point. But seeing the mothers with the children, babies, people slowly, calmly walking in the direction of the gate of the gas chamber, that we knew they would be dead in the next few minutes. It is not something that one can accept, one can understand, one can believe. Uh, we couldn't cry. Tears were not enough for such an experience. We attempted to dismiss it. We saw it, but we did not believe it. And it's hard to believe that you can see it and not believe it. But we developed a kind of a screen, a barrier against accepting what we were seeing.
It sounds like just, a coping mechanism, of course. Otherwise, how could you wake up each day, move at all? You've described to me that at a certain point, the crematoria that were designed for dealing with the masses of corpses, they could not cope with the number of dead. What happened then?
Yes, so when the Hungarian Jews were coming to Auschwitz in such huge numbers, many trains each day, the gas chambers and crematoria couldn't keep up. And so they were burning bodies in pits on the grounds inside the area. And of course, the flames could be seen from a distance. And the people who arrived at night, not only did they see fire belching from the chimneys, but they actually saw bodies being thrown into the pits as they were burning them. And they were terrified. There was an incredible crying and praying and screaming and blood-curdling sounds from people who saw their fate. I had to plug my ears with my fingers so I wouldn't hear the terrible sounds of despair and it's just unbelievable sounds. Yes.
Just sounds like an absolute hellscape, like apocalyptic. Irene, a number of people watching are writing in, commenting about your strength, given everything that you endured and witnessed. But in particular, on a more personal note, a woman named Sharon writes, I am a second generation. My father was a survivor of Auschwitz. He had night terrors his entire life. Sharon wants to know, how have you coped with the trauma?
Well, it's after liberation, I came to America. I had to learn English. I was sent to school. I became a teacher. I tried to adapt to my new country. I never could forget my experience. I had to cope with those feelings and get accustomed to the new ways. I had a very hard time. I was still young. I really followed. Every day was an effort to do the things that was required of me now and the things that I remembered. It was not an easy adjustment, and I think to this day I have to balance two things: the past, which is always with me, which is painful, and the wounds never heal, and my obligations to my new life of raising children. I was married for 63 years. Also, getting, getting adjusted to a new way of life.
Thank you, Irene. These are very, very intimate questions, intimate, painful memories, and thank you for being open to talking about them. Many years later, in the 1980s, your daughter, Leslie, and you have 3 children, showed you a copy of some photographs that were taken at Auschwitz by an SS photographer. This collection of pictures, which is now known as the Auschwitz album, was found after the war and later published. So when you saw these photos in the 1980s, what effect did it have on you, and in particular, 2 pictures that made you stop in your tracks?
Yes, so I had this picture of the separation, the arrival of Auschwitz in Auschwitz, and the separation, and I had this in my mind, edged in. But I began to think sometimes that it couldn't have happened, that perhaps it's exaggerated in my mind. But seeing it exactly the way I did remember it reaffirmed to me that, yes, this is exactly what I experienced. This is recorded. This is a historic record. Pictures were taken by the Nazis. And it was an astonishing and horrifying thing to understand and begin to believe that this really did happen to me and my family. So it's very hard to explain, to be reintroduced to this. I began to look at the pages, however, with a magnifying glass to see, as I recognized myself immediately when I got to that page, right after I was separated from my family. But then I thought that perhaps I will find some other members of my family, so shown in the photographs. And I looked very carefully, page after page, with a magnifying glass. And sure enough, I came to the page where my 2 little brothers were sitting in a wooded area, waiting with a crowd of people, waiting to enter the gas chamber. Of course, they were totally unaware that that is where they're heading. But I then tried to find a picture of my mother, and I was unable to locate her. And I kept looking and looking, and I was really very frightened that these little boys were on their own, and that they too will be entering the gas chamber on their own. And then all at once, I turned the magnifying glass, and I realized that that person, the profile of this woman sitting on the ground there, that was my mother next to the 2 little boys of Ruvain and Gershon. They were waiting to enter the gas chamber.
So in some way, through these photographs, you had an answer to one of the questions that had haunted you, were your little brothers alone? And you can see that they were with your mother, in fact. I also I misspoke earlier about your niece. Your sister's daughter is named Elaine, so I'm sorry for getting that name wrong.
Okay.
You had talked about when you were at Auschwitz that tears didn't come, that it was impossible to deal with the cognitive dissonance of what you were seeing and really absorb it. Did that last for the whole time that you were there?
It really did, because somehow tears would, I suppose, indicate that what we're seeing is true, and we're mourning people of our family. We did not allow it. I did not allow it to be true. It's a human feeling that we see it, but we don't believe it. It somehow helps to keep it away for a while. And just tears for this kind of terror and barbarism doesn't relieve the pain. And we were trying very much to be somewhat removed and just pretend that it's not what we're seeing isn't really happening.
That makes sense, just to endure. Viewers, we don't have enough time to go into the many, many important and complicated chapters of Irene's survival story. She was held at Auschwitz for 8 excruciating months and then survived a death march, a forced march of hundreds of miles away. Irene was then imprisoned in several other camps before finally being liberated in 1945 in Germany at a place named Neustadt-Glewe. Irene, you described to me that after liberation, several months later, you finally returned to your childhood home in Czechoslovakia, and that those tears that had been so bottled up or so absent during all that time finally fell. Could you please tell us a bit about that homecoming and what you remember?
Yes, I got home to our village and went into our house. Somebody was living in it, the family was living in the house. I went into the rooms and went from room to room. There was nothing of ours in the house except wallpaper that I recognized in one room, and came out the front again and went into the backyard, into the garden where we had some kind of an orchard, and it was in the fall, and the fruit was ripe and hanging on the trees, and I suddenly realized that the fruit survived. The place has continued. There's no one to pick the fruit, and where is everyone? And sudden the realization that they're not here and there never will be. I began to cry. The tears began to flow. The pain was very, very sharp and very sad, and it was unbearable to all of a sudden get the full effect of that. I came back, and my sister, the two of us, out of a large family, and everyone is gone.
You also had an encounter with some next door neighbors, right? People you had known very well on a daily basis.
Yeah, so the neighbors came out to talk to us, and one of the neighbors' boys, was the same age as my little boy Ruben, and he had grown about a foot and was thriving, and my little brother was dead. And it's terrible to contemplate that my family was gone.
And you've described to me that of about 30 Jewish children living in your hometown before the war, only you and Serena survived. And you were
Yes.
also the only 2 surviving members of your family of 8. But it makes sense the way you describe about the fruit trees and another little boy growing. How could it be that the natural order of things kept progressing, kept moving, while you were in this alternative reality? It's jarring. We have a lot of questions and comments coming in, Irene. A man named Bill writes, "Thank you for sharing. Irene, thank you for sharing your nightmare story. Your personal story is the only way to understand the Holocaust. The number 6 million is impossible to grasp." And 2 other questions, Irene, if I'll combine them. Emily, who is a school teacher in Texas, as well as a homeschooling mom, she's watching, and she is asking, what do you most hope that children of today, excuse me, will learn and understand about the Holocaust?
Well, of course, if they can understand that such a thing was possible to perpetrate by people against others, that's the first thing to just feel that, realize that people can be so cruel. Uh, that's the one thing. But hopefully that children, students would understand that we're all the same human beings, and that uh, we have owe each other at least the recognition that we're uh, human beings with the same kind of feelings. I mean, they have to learn that people are not so different, that they cannot have empathy for each other.
In 1947, Irene and Serena immigrated to the United States, as you mentioned earlier here. And we see you here with a poster from HIAS, which is an organization that still exists today, that is a Jewish organization that supports refugees and people in crisis zones all over the world. As you described, you got married, were married for over 60 years, had a career as a teacher. Teaching what age, Irene? What grades?
In middle school, mostly. Yes.
Middle school and raising a family. We have another viewer question, Irene. A woman named Elizabeth writes, what can we as humans, as citizens, do for you today and in the future? What would make a difference from your perspective? It's a hard question, a big question.
Well, you can't return, history, reverse it. Well, I think people have to learn the history of the Holocaust and the history of genocide. And they have to learn that killing each other on this planet is not what we are here for. That's not our destiny. That we can live in peace by recognizing each other's humanity. We are not so different from each other. They cannot separate people and put them into other categories as subhuman and abuse them and in fact have killing facilities to eliminate them. That this is not the way humanity should be. This is not the way we should live on this planet.
Irene, you've described to me before that you take some solace in knowing, in hoping that 100 years from now, 200 years from now, people will still study Auschwitz, talk about Auschwitz, and that it is incumbent upon all of us who are younger than you, younger than me, to go forward as witnesses, having heard your story.
Yes.
In closing, Irene, I know it's human nature, and I hear it in some of these questions, to want to find some meaning in all of this horror, and also to believe that survival could lead to a happy ending of sorts. And of course, you have known moments of great happiness since the Holocaust. You have a family, you have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. But any closing thoughts about how you would describe the experience of being a survivor and how you look at a world that abandoned you at the time?
Well, yes, I did come back and picked up a normal life and raised a family and readjusted to a new world. But I always had to balance that cruelty that I remembered, the pain of witnessing a genocide of people. That an Auschwitz was built by human beings in a scientific way to being to enable people to murder huge numbers much more efficiently than the, the ways in before by guns and other kind of shooting and bombs. This was more efficient. This was planned to kill people in a way that the victims did not have any inkling of what's going to happen to them. It was hidden, and it was efficient. Thousands could be killed at once, calmly and almost invisibly. And in Auschwitz was a place where it was perfected, where thousands of people could be efficiently killed and disposed of, and not only unsuspecting victims, but to remove the evidence, the dead, they utilized our own people to provide that job of disposing of the bodies. A most cruel way of involving the family, the men, the families of people who were used to pull the bodies out and dispose of them in the crematorium. So this Auschwitz was a place that defied all human feelings towards other people.
Yeah, to make sure that the audience understands, Irene is describing prisoners known in German as the Sonderkommando, who were forced, who were enslaved to do the dirty work for the Germans in the gas chambers and the crematoria, Jewish men who were forced to be part of that process. Irene, I think you speak with such power, but also remind us that this is not something primitive that happened. This is an example, a horrific example of how human beings can use their intelligence, their skills, their sophistication in the service of the cruelest evil, as well as in the service of creativity and accomplishment and science for good. So thank you so much for complicating our understanding of these events, for your candor, for your honesty. It was my privilege to talk with you, and we are all very grateful to learn from you today. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
For all of us, listening to the very visceral and intimate way that Irene describes her experience reminds us that we cannot let time dull our senses to the realities and the very, very personal and individual realities of this period in history. Auschwitz has become the symbol of so much evil. It's a name that is synonymous with horror and with the world's failures. And that is why the United Nations chose the date of its liberation, January 27th, as a time to pause and mark these events. Each year here in Washington, D.C., on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we also pause to remember and pay tribute to those who cannot speak for themselves. And at our museum, we invite visitors and volunteers into our Hall of Remembrance to recite the names of just some of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust. Today, we close with personal memories of just a few of these innocent people.
I am thinking often about my brother, who, aside from being adorable, was a year and a half younger than I was. I remember ice skating with him, holding hands, and we did a lot of things together, like walking, talking, singing, and playing soccer. We never argued. We were always warm and loving, always.
Today, I would like to remember my father, Grunwald Arpad, who lost his life during the Holocaust at a very young age of 36. I know that my father loved my mom and me because I have the postcard he sent from forced labor camps. He finished his letters with this sentence: "Millions of kisses to you and my precious Peter from Arpad, who loves you a lot.
She was a very strong person, my Aunt Giza, to take care of me and my brother, her sister's children, after our mother was already sent to the concentration camp. That took an enormous strength. And I remember her running with my brother and me, each by one hand, and taking us to our neighbor and saying, please take these children, when she herself was being deported. It was a moment that I will never forget.